I stood alone in the courtroom, my wife's lawyer smirking at my empty side of the aisle. Everyone assumed I was powerless, but they didn't know what I had in my pocket. What happens when the quiet man everyone ignored stands up and reveals the truth? The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as I sat on the hard wooden bench, watching Rhea whisper conspiratorially with her attorney. Her Uncle Martin sat behind her, occasionally glancing my way with what I could only describe as smug satisfaction. The courtroom gallery was filled with curious onlookers, some of whom I recognized as mutual friends who had already chosen sides. "Look at him," Rhea's voice carried just loud enough for nearby ears. "He can't even afford proper representation." A ripple of quiet laughter moved through the room. I kept my expression neutral, my hands folded calmly in my lap. What they didn't know was that I had spent the last 3 months preparing for this moment with surgical precision. My name is Warren Beckett, and for 44 years I've been the kind of man people overlook. A warehouse supervisor who shows up early, stays late, and handles problems without fanfare. My co-workers respect me, but they don't see me as exciting. My wife used to call me Reliable Warren in a tone that made it sound like an insult. 3 weeks earlier, I'd been sitting in my small apartment, surrounded by legal documents and unpaid bills. The divorce papers were spread across my kitchen table like formal charges. Rhea wanted everything: the house, the car, substantial support payments, and primary custody of our 13-year-old son, Noah. Her lawyer's demands portrayed me as an irresponsible parent concealing income, while she claimed to be barely getting by. The apartment felt hollow without Noah's presence. He was staying with Rhea during the proceedings, and our conversations had become stilted phone calls where I could hear her coaching him in the background. "Dad, are you really going to fight this?" Noah had asked during our last call, his voice small and uncertain. "I'm going to make sure the truth comes out, son," I had replied, not knowing then how prophetic those words would become. At work, the break room conversations inevitably turned to my situation. My co-workers meant well, but their pity was obvious. "Man, divorce court is brutal," said Jake from shipping. "My cousin got cleaned out, lost everything to a woman who hadn't worked a day in 10 years. "Warren should just settle," added Maria from receiving. "Fighting it just makes lawyers rich." I listened to their advice while eating my sandwich, noting how they assumed I was helpless. Even Anya Lenton from HR, who had always been professional and kind, seemed to think I was in over my head. "Warren," she had said quietly one afternoon, "do you have copies of all your employment records? Sometimes things get misrepresented in court." Her question struck me as odd. Why would my employment records be misrepresented? I made a decent salary as a warehouse supervisor, but nothing extravagant. Certainly nothing that would justify Rhea's claims about hidden income. That evening, I received a text from Noah that changed everything. "Dad, I heard Mom and Uncle Martin talking about moving boxes to somewhere safe. They said you wouldn't think to look there." I stared at the message for a long time. Martin Abel, Rhea's uncle, was a quiet accountant who had always maintained he was staying neutral in our divorce. He handled some of Rhea's financial affairs and had been present at several of our court dates, always sitting behind her like a silent guardian. The next morning, I found something interesting in my car. A parking stub from Secure Store Self-Storage, dated 2 days earlier. It must have fallen from Rhea's purse when she retrieved some belongings from the house. I had never known her to rent a storage unit. At work, Nellie Rosen, the building maintenance supervisor, mentioned something that caught my attention. "Strangest thing," she said while checking the security logs. "Someone was in the building late last night. Badge shows it was after midnight." "Probably someone working overtime," I suggested. "Maybe," Nellie shrugged. "But the badge belonged to someone from outside the company, some accountant who does work for HR sometimes." Martin. My pulse quickened, but I kept my expression neutral. That afternoon, I sat in my apartment and created a timeline. Noah's message about moving boxes, the storage unit parking stub, Martin's late-night access to my workplace. A pattern was emerging, but I needed more information. I pulled out the court filing that had arrived that morning. Rhea's lawyer was requesting increased alimony based on my significantly higher income than previously disclosed. According to their motion, I was earning nearly twice my actual salary and had been hiding money from the court. I checked my employment records. My HR file clearly showed my actual income, which was exactly what I had reported. Someone had provided false information to Rhea's legal team. The pieces were starting to fit together, but I needed proof. Real, undeniable evidence that would stand up in court. I marked a date on my calendar, the date Noah mentioned overhearing the conversation about moving boxes. Then I whispered to myself, that's when it started. The next morning, I arrived at work early and went straight to Nellie's office. She was reviewing security footage from the previous week, her coffee steaming beside a stack of maintenance reports. "Nellie, could I ask you about those after-hours badge logs you mentioned?" She looked up, surprised. "The ones from Monday night? Sure, what about them?" "Could you show me exactly when someone accessed the building?" Nellie pulled up the digital log on her computer. "Here it is. Badge number 4471, registered to Martin Abel, entered at 2:13 a.m., exited at 3:47 a.m. What would someone need to access at that hour?" "Good question. The only offices open to external consultants are HR and accounting. Everything else requires special authorization." I thanked her and left, my mind racing. Why would Martin need access to my workplace in the middle of the night? That afternoon, I was at the supermarket when I spotted Rhea loading boxes into her car. She was parked at the far end of the lot, away from the main entrance. When she saw me, she quickly slammed the trunk and got into her car without acknowledgement. The boxes looked like document storage containers, the kind used for financial records and legal papers. My phone buzzed with another text from Noah. "Dad, Mom has a secret room at some storage place. She told me never to mention it to anyone." I sat in my car for a long time, processing this information. A storage unit filled with boxes, accessed in secret, while Martin simultaneously gained after-hours access to my employment records. The implications were staggering. I spent that evening researching public records online. It took several searches, but I finally found it. A storage unit registered under Rhea's name at Secure Store Self-Storage. The rental agreement was dated 6 months ago, right around the time she first mentioned divorce. The next morning, Martin called me. His voice was different than usual, more formal and somewhat threatening. "Warren, I think it's time we had a conversation about your situation." "What situation is that, Martin?" "This divorce proceeding. You're making things harder than they need to be. Rhea just wants what's fair." "And what would be fair?" "Accept the settlement offer. Let things go for the family's sake. Fighting this will only hurt Noah in the long run." The call ended abruptly, leaving me with an uneasy feeling. Martin had never shown such direct interest in my divorce before. His sudden involvement suggested something more than family concern. That afternoon, I received another court filing. Rhea's lawyer was now claiming I had been hiding substantial income and requesting an emergency hearing to address my financial deception. The motion included what appeared to be employment records showing inflated salary figures. I immediately went to see Anya in HR. "Anya, did your office provide any income verification to external parties recently?" She checked her records carefully. "No, Warren. We haven't released any employment information about you to anyone. We would need your written authorization for that. Someone submitted falsified employment records to the court." Anya's expression grew serious. "That's a serious allegation. Do you have copies of what was submitted?" I showed her the court filing. She compared it to my actual HR file, and her face darkened. "Warren, these numbers are completely fabricated. Your actual salary is exactly what you reported. Someone created fake documents." While I was processing this revelation, I found something else in Rhea's belongings that she had left behind. a receipt for a safety deposit box I had never known about. The box had been opened the same day Martin accessed my workplace. That evening, Nellie called me at home. "Warren, I pulled the security footage from Monday night. You might want to see this." "What does it show?" "Martin Abel entering the building at 2:13 a.m., just like the log says, but he wasn't alone. There was a woman with him." A sudden chill washed over me. "Can you identify the woman?" "The footage is pretty clear. It looks like your wife." I asked Nellie to save copies of everything: the footage, the logs, the badge records. She agreed and mentioned that backup copies were automatically stored on an off-site server. The next day, Noah called with more information. "Dad, I heard Mom on the phone with Uncle Martin. She sounded worried about bank stuff and kept saying they needed to be more careful." "What kind of bank stuff?" "I don't know, but she had a bunch of papers spread out on the table. When she saw me, she quickly put them away." I spent that evening organizing everything I had discovered. The pattern was becoming clear. Martin and Rhea had been working together to manipulate the divorce proceedings. They had gained illegal access to my workplace to either steal or fabricate employment records, while simultaneously hiding assets in a secret storage unit and possibly undisclosed bank accounts. But I needed more proof. Allegations without evidence would be dismissed as the desperate claims of a bitter ex-husband. I photographed the storage unit contract and sent it to Anya, asking her to keep it confidential. Then I began planning my next moves. I needed to document everything systematically and build an unshakable case. The truth was emerging, but I had to be patient and methodical. One mistake could ruin everything. The court notice arrived on a Tuesday morning, marked urgent. The hearing date had been moved up by 2 weeks, and new demands were attached. Rhea's legal team was requesting immediate temporary alimony, claiming I was about to hide or transfer assets. The irony wasn't lost on me. I took the morning off work and went straight to HR. Anya helped me pull my complete employment history, including every pay stub, tax document, and performance review from the past 5 years. "Warren, your income has been completely consistent," she said, spreading the documents across her desk. "There's a standard cost of living increase each year, and you received a merit raise last spring, but nothing that would justify these inflated figures they're claiming. Could someone have accessed these records without authorization?" "Not through our normal systems, but if someone had physical access to the building..." She trailed off, understanding the implication. That afternoon, Nellie approached me with disturbing news. "Warren, I got a strange request yesterday. Someone called asking about deleting security camera footage from last week. Said it was for privacy compliance, but we don't delete footage unless there's a court order." "Who made the request?" The caller identified himself as Martin Abel, said he was representing an employee's privacy concerns. My hands clenched involuntarily. They were trying to cover their tracks. That evening, Rhea suggested we meet at the local diner for a family dinner with Noah. I should have known it was a trap. Noah seemed uncomfortable from the moment we sat down. Rhea was overly cheerful, talking about working things out amicably, while Martin sat at a nearby table, pretending to read a newspaper. "Warren, I think we've both been letting our lawyers get carried away," Rhea said sweetly. "Maybe we should settle this ourselves, for Noah's sake." "What kind of settlement did you have in mind?" "Nothing unreasonable. I keep the house, you pay fair support, and we share custody. Simple and clean. Based on accurate financial information, of course." Her smile faltered slightly. "Of course. Though I hope you'll be honest about your real income this time." "My real income is exactly what I've reported, Rhea. Every penny is documented." Martin looked up from his newspaper, catching Rhea's eye. She nodded almost imperceptibly. "Warren, some people have suggested you might have other sources of income, side work, cash payments, that sort of thing." I kept my voice calm. "What people?" "It doesn't matter. The point is, if you're hiding money, it's going to come out eventually. Better to be honest now." After dinner, Martin cornered me in the parking lot while Rhea took Noah to the car. "Warren, you need to understand something. This situation is bigger than you realize. There are family considerations at play here. What kind of considerations? Rhea has been through a lot. Her family wants to see her taken care of. If you make this difficult, people might start looking into your background more carefully. Are you threatening me, Martin? I'm giving you friendly advice. Some stones are better left unturned. His words felt like a threat, but his tone remained conversational. I realized that Martin was more than just Rhea's helpful uncle. He was the architect of whatever scheme they were running. That night, I went through my old email files and found something interesting. 3 months before Rhea mentioned divorce, she had sent me a message about updating our financial agreements. The email referenced a post-nuptial agreement that we had supposedly signed, though I had no memory of it. The next morning, Anya suggested I check my home files for any notarized documents I might have forgotten about. Sometimes people sign things without fully understanding their importance, she said. It's worth looking through everything carefully. I spent that afternoon going through every file box in my apartment. In the bottom of an old storage container, I found a folder labeled Legal Documents. Inside was a post-nuptial agreement, properly notarized and signed by both Rhea and myself. I had no memory of signing it, but my signature was clearly authentic. The document outlined asset division in case of divorce, but several key provisions had been added in different ink. The additions heavily favored Rhea and included clauses about my obligation to maintain her standard of living regardless of circumstances. The modifications weren't initialed, and the notary stamp was dated after my signature. Someone had altered the document after I signed it. That evening, Noah called with more disturbing information. Dad, I heard Mom and Uncle Martin talking again. They were saying something about making you look unreliable in court. Mom said the judge needed to see you as someone who couldn't be trusted. What else did they say? Uncle Martin said something about having backup plans. And Mom kept talking about money that you supposedly had hidden somewhere. I scanned the post-nuptial agreement and stored copies in multiple secure locations. The pattern of deception was becoming clear, but I needed to understand the full scope of their plan. The next day, Rhea posted on social media, "Some people just can't let go, even when they're wrong. Sometimes you have to protect yourself and your children from toxic behavior." The post received dozens of supportive comments from friends who didn't know the full story. I was being painted as the villain in a narrative I didn't even understand. That afternoon, I received an anonymous tip via email. "Martin Abel has been moving money for your wife. Check the corporate banking records for Abel Accounting Services." The email came from a generic account and provided no other information, but it confirmed my suspicions about Martin's deeper involvement. I spent the evening reviewing everything I had discovered. Every accusation against me seemed to correspond with something Martin had touched: my employment records, the post-nuptial agreement, the storage unit, and now possibly hidden bank accounts. They weren't just trying to win the divorce. They were systematically destroying my credibility while covering their own tracks. I emailed a backup copy of the post-nuptial agreement to a secure cloud address, then began planning my next moves. The truth was emerging, but I needed irrefutable proof of their conspiracy. The game was far from over. The USB drive felt heavy in my pocket as I walked into work the next morning. Nellie had called me at home the night before, her voice urgent and slightly nervous. "Warren, I've got something you need to see. Can you meet me early tomorrow?" Now, sitting in her cluttered office, surrounded by maintenance schedules and security monitors, I understood her concern. "I pulled all the footage from the past month," she said, handing me the drive. "What I found is, well, you should see for yourself." She loaded the video on her computer. The timestamp showed 1:45 a.m., 3 weeks earlier. The black and white security footage clearly showed Martin and Rhea entering the building together. Martin was carrying a briefcase and Rhea had a large handbag. They moved purposefully toward the elevator. "They knew exactly where they were going," Nellie observed. No hesitation, no looking around. They'd been there before. How many times? At least 6 visits over the past 2 months. Always after midnight, always together. I watched the footage carefully. In one clip, Martin was carrying what appeared to be a folder marked confidential. In another, Rhea was photographing documents with her phone. Nellie, this is evidence of criminal activity. I know. That's why I made copies. There's a backup of all security logs stored off-site with our security company. Even if someone deleted the local copies, the originals would still exist. Later that morning, I decided to visit Martin's accounting firm. I couldn't confront him directly, but I could observe his behavior and maybe learn something useful. The office was in a modest strip mall, with Able Accounting Services printed on a simple glass door. I posed as a delivery driver, carrying an empty package and waiting in the small lobby. Through the partially open office door, I could see Martin frantically shredding documents. His normally calm demeanor was replaced by obvious anxiety. When his secretary stepped out for lunch, I heard him making a phone call. "We need to accelerate the timeline," he said. "Warren is asking too many questions. No, the storage unit is secure, but we should move the bank records. Yes, I understand the risks." I left before he finished the call, but I had heard enough. There were bank records hidden somewhere, and they were worried about my investigation. That afternoon, Anya found another piece of the puzzle. "Warren, I discovered something troubling. Someone submitted a wage verification form to the court claiming it came from our HR department. The signature is forged." "How can you tell?" "The form uses our old letterhead from 2 years ago, and the employee ID number is wrong. Whoever created this didn't have access to our current systems. But they had access to enough information to make it look authentic." "Exactly. They knew just enough to be convincing, but not enough to avoid mistakes." That evening, there was a community center meeting that Rhea had organized. She called it a support group for families dealing with difficult divorces, but I suspected it was really an opportunity to sway public opinion. I didn't attend, but several mutual friends did. The next day, I started receiving concerned calls from people who had been told I was hiding money and making threats against Rhea and Martin. "Warren, I don't want to get involved," said Tom Henderson, a longtime friend. "But Rhea seemed really scared last night. She said you've been following her and making accusations." "Tom, I haven't followed anyone. I've been gathering evidence of financial fraud." "Look, man, maybe you should just settle this thing. Divorce makes people crazy, and you don't want to do something you'll regret." The conversation was frustrating but revealing. Rhea and Martin were actively working to isolate me and discredit any evidence I might present. That night I reviewed all the security footage Nellie had provided. I created a detailed timeline of every visit, noting what they carried in and out of the building. In several clips, Martin was holding folders that appeared to contain financial documents. The most damaging footage showed them leaving the building with a box of papers. The timestamp was 3:22 a.m., just hours before Rhea's lawyer filed the motion claiming I had hidden income. I also checked the contents of my storage unit against my insurance records. Everything was accounted for, which meant Rhea's secret storage unit contained items that weren't part of our joint property. The next morning, Noah called with more information. "Dad, Mom seemed really nervous yesterday. She kept checking her phone and talking to Uncle Martin about bank stuff again." "Did you hear anything specific?" "She said something about moving money before someone found out. And Uncle Martin told her to stop worrying because you didn't have the resources to investigate properly." Their confidence was both insulting and useful. They underestimated me because I was quiet and methodical, but those same qualities were helping me build an airtight case. That afternoon, Nellie approached me with alarming news. "Warren, Martin tried to intimidate me yesterday. He came to the building and demanded I delete all security footage from the past 3 months." "What did you tell him?" "I told him I didn't have the authority to delete anything without a court order. He got angry and said I was interfering in family business." "Did he threaten you?" "Not directly, but he made it clear that continuing to help you would be a mistake. I told him the backup logs are stored off-site and I can't access them anyway. Nellie's courage impressed me, but I was worried about her safety. Martin and Rhea were clearly getting desperate. Anya recommended that I not share any of the evidence I had gathered until the court hearing. If they know what you have, they'll try to discredit it or create counter-evidence, she warned. Keep everything secret until you can present it all at once. Her advice made sense. I had been patient this long. I could wait a little longer. That evening, I noticed that Rhea was suddenly avoiding all direct contact. Previously, she had been calling about Noah's schedule and other logistics, but now all communication went through her lawyer. I transferred all my evidence to a second, private cloud storage account and created multiple backup copies. Whatever happened next, the truth would survive. The final confrontation was approaching, and I was ready. I couldn't sleep. It was 2:30 a.m., and I sat at my kitchen table surrounded by documents, timelines, and evidence. Tomorrow was the hearing, and I wanted to review everything one more time. The master timeline stretched across 3 pages, documenting every suspicious event from the past 4 months. Martin's after-hours building access, Rhea's secret storage unit, the forged employment records, the altered post-nuptial agreement. It all fit together like pieces of a complex puzzle. My phone buzzed with a text from Noah. "Dad, they brought home some papers from school today. Something about parent income verification." I stared at the message. Even Noah's school was being dragged into their scheme. They were trying to create a paper trail that would support their false claims about my income. The next morning, I was sorting through old mail when I found something that sent a sudden chill through me. Mixed in with utility bills and credit card offers was a bank statement I had never seen before. It was addressed to Rhea at our old house, but the account was in her name only. The statement showed deposits totaling nearly $50,000 over the past 6 months. The money had come from various sources, some from her Uncle Martin's business account, some from liquidated investments I didn't know she had, and some from cash deposits that weren't explained. While Rhea was claiming poverty and demanding alimony, she had been systematically hiding substantial assets. My phone rang. It was Martin, and his voice was different, more desperate than threatening. "Warren, I know we've had our differences, but I want to make you an offer." "What kind of offer?" "I know some things about your past that Rhea doesn't. That incident at your previous job, the accusations that were never proven. It would be unfortunate if that information became public during divorce proceedings." I was stunned. The incident he was referring to was a completely fabricated allegation that had been investigated and dismissed years ago. A disgruntled employee had claimed I was stealing inventory, but security footage proved I was innocent. The matter was closed and sealed. "Are you trying to blackmail me, Martin? I'm trying to help you understand the consequences of pushing this too far. Some stones are better left unturned." I started recording the call on my phone. "What exactly are you proposing?" "Accept Rhea's settlement offer. Stop digging into things that don't concern you. Walk away with your dignity intact." "And if I don't?" "Then you'll discover that divorce court can be very unforgiving to men with questionable backgrounds." The call ended, but I had recorded the entire conversation. Martin had just provided evidence of attempted blackmail and conspiracy. That afternoon, I drove past Martin's house and noticed something interesting. Through his home office window, I could see filing cabinets and a desk covered with papers. One folder on his desk was labeled Contingency RB, Rhea Beckett. I didn't stop or approach the house, but the sight of that folder confirmed that Martin had been planning contingencies for Rhea's divorce long before it was filed. At work, Anya double-checked all my HR records one more time. "Warren, there are absolutely no discrepancies in your employment file. Your income, your performance reviews, your attendance, everything is exactly as it should be. Anyone claiming otherwise is lying. What about the forged documents submitted to the court?" I've prepared a complete employment verification package with official seals and signatures. If anyone questions your income, we have irrefutable proof. That evening, Nellie sent me a text. They're getting nervous. Martin tried to access the old server today, but security wouldn't let him in without proper authorization. Their desperation was showing. They knew their scheme was falling apart, but they didn't know how much evidence I had gathered. A mutual friend called that night with a warning. Warren, I don't know what's going on between you and Rhea, but she's been telling people some pretty serious stuff. She says you've been stalking her and making threats. What kind of threats? She claims you said you'd ruin her financially and turn Noah against her. Look, I've known you for years, and it doesn't sound like you, but people are starting to talk. I realized this was part of their strategy. By painting me as unstable and vindictive, they hoped to discredit any evidence I presented. It was a clever tactic, but it wouldn't work if I remained calm and factual. Before bed, Noah called one more time. Dad, will you be okay tomorrow? His simple question touched me deeply. Throughout this entire ordeal, Noah had been caught in the middle, fed lies and manipulated by his mother and great-uncle. We'll be fine, son. Tomorrow, we're going to tell the truth. That's all we can do. I love you, Dad. I love you too, Noah. I spent the final hour before sleep, reviewing my master timeline one more time. Every accusation Rhea and Martin had made against me corresponded with their own illegal activities. They had projected their crimes onto me, hoping to deflect attention from their own behavior. The hidden bank account, the forged employment records, the altered post-nuptial agreement, the secret storage unit, the after-hours building access. It was all documented with timestamps, photographs, and witness testimony. I copied the master file to 3 different locations, a USB drive, cloud storage, and a locked drawer in my apartment. Then I placed the USB drive and my apartment keys on the kitchen table. Tomorrow, I whispered to myself. For the first time in weeks, I slept soundly. I arrived at the courthouse 30 minutes early, wearing my best suit and carrying a simple briefcase. The same briefcase I had used for work presentations, now filled with evidence that would change everything. The courtroom was already filling with observers. Rhea sat at the plaintiff's table with her attorney, a sharp-dressed man named Davidson, who had a reputation for aggressive tactics. Martin sat directly behind them, occasionally leaning forward to whisper in Rhea's ear. I took my seat at the defendant's table, alone. "Where's your lawyer?" someone whispered behind me. "He can't afford one," Rhea said loudly enough for several people to hear. That should tell you something about his claims of hidden income. A ripple of quiet laughter moved through the gallery. I opened my briefcase and arranged my documents calmly, ignoring the commentary. Judge Patricia Harmon entered the courtroom. She was in her 60s, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense reputation. I had researched her background thoroughly. She had little patience for deception or theatrics. "This is case number 2023 DR 4471, Beckett versus Beckett," the clerk announced. Judge Harmon looked at both tables, noting my lack of representation. "Mr. Beckett, I see you're appearing pro se today. Do you understand your rights and the procedures of this court?" "Yes, Your Honor. I'm prepared to present evidence and testimony regarding the allegations against me." Davidson, Rhea's lawyer, stood immediately. "Your Honor, the defendant's decision to represent himself demonstrates either his inability to afford proper counsel or his belief that he can manipulate these proceedings through sympathy. Either way, it supports our client's claims about his financial deception. Mr. Davidson, you'll have your opportunity to present your case. Please be seated." Davidson opened with confidence, presenting the fabricated employment records and claiming I had been hiding substantial income. "Your Honor, Mr. Beckett has systematically deceived this court about his financial resources. Our evidence shows he earns nearly twice what he has reported, while his wife struggles to maintain basic living expenses. He presented document after document, each one professionally formatted but completely false. The forged HR letterhead, the inflated salary figures, the fake overtime records. It was an impressive fabrication. Furthermore, Davidson continued, Mr. Beckett has been engaging in intimidating behavior toward my client and her family members, attempting to discourage them from pursuing their rightful claims. When Davidson finished, Judge Harmon turned to me. Mr. Beckett, you may present your response. I stood calmly and approached the bench. Your Honor, I request permission to submit evidence as a pro se litigant. I believe the court will find this evidence directly relevant to the allegations against me. Proceed, Mr. Beckett. I returned to my table and picked up the first document. Your Honor, this is my actual employment record from HR, including official letterhead, employee ID numbers, and authorized signatures. As you can see, my income is exactly what I reported to this court. I handed copies to the judge and to Davidson. His confident expression began to falter as he reviewed the authentic documents. Furthermore, Your Honor, I have evidence that the employment records submitted by the plaintiff were forged. The letterhead is outdated, the employee ID is incorrect, and the signature is fabricated. Davidson stood quickly. Objection, Your Honor. The defendant is making serious accusations without foundation. Mr. Davidson, I'll determine what has foundation. Mr. Beckett, do you have evidence to support your claims? Yes, Your Honor. I'd like to present security footage that shows how these false documents were created. I connected my laptop to the courtroom's display system and loaded the video files. The timestamp clearly showed Martin and Rhea entering my workplace at 1:45 a.m. This footage shows the plaintiff and her uncle, Martin Abel, illegally accessing my workplace in the middle of the night. They had no authorization to be there, and their purpose was to steal or fabricate employment records. The courtroom was completely silent as the footage played. You could see Martin carrying folders marked confidential, and Rhea photographing documents with her phone. Rhea whispered urgently to Davidson, who looked increasingly uncomfortable. Your Honor, I continued, I also have evidence of hidden assets that contradict the plaintiff's claims of financial hardship. I presented the storage unit contract and the bank statement showing Rhea's secret account. The plaintiff has been systematically hiding assets while claiming poverty. This storage unit contains documents and valuables that were never disclosed to the court, and this bank account shows deposits totaling $50,000. Davidson tried to object, but Judge Harmon silenced him with a look. Mr. Beckett, how did you obtain these documents? The storage unit contract is public record, Your Honor. The bank statement was mailed to our former joint residence and mixed in with other mail. I then played the audio recording of Martin's attempted blackmail. Your Honor, this recording demonstrates that the plaintiff's uncle attempted to coerce me into accepting a fraudulent settlement by threatening to fabricate additional false evidence. Martin's voice filled the courtroom. Some stones are better left unturned. Divorce court can be very unforgiving to men with questionable backgrounds. Martin stood up suddenly in the gallery. That recording was made without my consent. It's illegal. Mr. Abel, Judge Harmon said sharply, you are not a party to these proceedings. Sit down or leave my courtroom. A bailiff moved closer to Martin, who sat down reluctantly. I presented the altered post-nuptial agreement, showing how clauses had been added after my signature. Your Honor, this document was modified without my knowledge or consent. The original agreement I signed was fair and reasonable. The additions were made in different ink and are not initialed. Finally, I handed over my master timeline, documenting every false claim and every piece of evidence. Your Honor, this timeline shows a systematic pattern of fraud, perjury, and asset concealment. Every accusation made against me corresponds to illegal activity by the plaintiff and her uncle. The courtroom was completely silent. Davidson looked stunned, frantically shuffling through papers as if searching for a response that didn't exist. Judge Harmon reviewed the evidence carefully, her expression growing darker with each document. Mr. Davidson, does your client wish to respond to these allegations? Davidson whispered urgently with Rhea, who appeared to be in shock. Your Honor, we need time to review this evidence and prepare a response. Mr. Davidson, this is not a preliminary hearing. Your client made serious allegations about hidden income and financial deception. Mr. Beckett has presented evidence that those allegations are not only false, but were part of a deliberate scheme to defraud this court. Judge Harmon's voice grew stern. Furthermore, the evidence suggests that your client and her uncle engaged in criminal activity to fabricate evidence for these proceedings. She turned to the court clerk. I want the bailiff to escort Mr. Martin Abel into custody, pending investigation of these allegations. The evidence of attempted blackmail and conspiracy is substantial. Martin tried to leave the courtroom, but the bailiff blocked his path. Your Honor, I said, I should mention that Ms. Nellie Rosen from Building Maintenance is available to testify about the security footage and access logs if needed. That won't be necessary, Mr. Beckett. The evidence speaks for itself. Judge Harmon slammed her gavel. After reviewing the evidence presented today, I find that the plaintiff's claims of hidden income are not only unsubstantiated but appear to be part of a deliberate attempt to defraud this court. The plaintiff's request for increased alimony is denied. She continued, her voice filled with anger. Furthermore, I am imposing sanctions on the plaintiff for perjury and asset concealment. The hidden bank account and storage unit demonstrate that the plaintiff's claims of financial hardship were fraudulent. Rhea began crying, but Judge Harmon wasn't finished. Mr. Abel, you are being held in contempt of court for attempted blackmail and conspiracy. The district attorney's office will be notified of these proceedings for potential criminal prosecution. She turned to Davidson. Mr. Davidson, your client's conduct in this matter is reprehensible. I suggest you advise her to cooperate fully with any criminal investigation that may follow. The gavel came down with finality. Sanctions imposed. This court will not tolerate deception. Case dismissed. The courtroom erupted in whispers and gasps. Rhea sat in stunned silence as Martin was led away in handcuffs. Davidson gathered his papers quickly, avoiding eye contact with anyone. I closed my briefcase and walked calmly toward the exit. In the hallway, several people who had been laughing at me earlier now looked at me with something approaching respect. My phone buzzed with a text from Noah. Dad, I heard what happened. I'm proud of you for telling the truth. 3 months later, Rhea pled guilty to fraud and perjury charges. Martin was sentenced to 2 years in prison for conspiracy and attempted blackmail. The hidden assets were divided fairly, and I was awarded primary